Thank you so much. So my name is Sahila. I'm with Temple of Geek. Thank you, Davina and Sharon, for both joining me today to talk about The Wheel of Time, season three. I want to dive right into episode four because that was just like such a just a beautiful episode, and there was so much going on in there, and like a lot going on from both like hair, makeup, and prosthetics, as well as costuming. And so I wanted to talk about, I'll talk first about Rand, and then we'll talk about Moiraine and a whole lot of other things. But Rand, so we see him go through so many different iterations, like 6 to 7 different looks throughout time. What was it like working on those looks, given that they were, there had to be sort of like a visual almost cohesion between, him and his ancestors, but then it's not just, different people, but it's like different people throughout different parts of time within this world. So what was it like working on both like the prosthetics and the visuals of like his face, as well as like the costuming throughout these different eras?
Yeah, well, it was tough. It was tough to put together this episode for me, and for the time frame that we had to put it together. And we had so many meetings to start off with,
Mhm.
and we worked closely with Thomas Nellen, who was the director, as well as Rafe, the showrunner, and writer of this episode. And so we started to kind of dive in because when you read the episode, I think Sharon, I'll probably talk for you as well. We were like, what is happening? What are we doing? And so it was trying to kind of like have an understanding about what is actually happening at every aspect and every step of the way. And we knew that Yosha was going to be playing all of his 7 ancestors, and so
Mhm.
from that point we started after it was basically we just had to get going and start the concepts of them all. And so I did hyper realistic concept drawings of Rand in all of the looks, and it was honing them in to kind of making Lewin look like he was a teenager up to
Mhm.
Jonai, who had to look like he was in his 70s. And
Yeah.
they had to have versions. You had Roderick, who had to look more futuristic, and
Hmm.
had all of these different aspects, and as well as looking at Yosha and his frame, and he's slight but muscular. And so how were we going to do that, and knowing where the potentials of, we were going to be shooting in Namibia in 40-degree
Hmm.
heat,
Hmm.
and how was this going to work, and with the some of the bodysuiting and stuff like that we also had to add in, along with the thick, well, not the thick, but the heaviness of the prosthetics, as well as
Hmm.
facial hair and contact lenses, and then long wigs, and all of those aspects. And so Yosha was fantastic at being completely on board, and he was super excited about playing. I mean, I don't know whether you ever get this twice in your life, whether you get to play
Right.
these kind of characters. So he really took it on board, and he was super collaborative with me, and giving great ideas actually of just how he felt like he wanted to wear the hair and the certain wigs that we had. And for me, it was about having the right color red hair each
Hmm.
as well, and
Hmm.
how that was going to look, and to make sure that they all look different, and the facial hair that I also had to add into that. So
Hmm.
we did a lot of testing, and in those testing periods, Yosha would take off and wear the costume and wear the makeup for a good couple of hours, and he'd have contact lenses in, which he'd never worn before in his life. So these are all kind of new processes to him, and he would spend a good couple of hours just getting into character and how he was going to play it. And it was
Hmm.
great. He did such a fantastic job. And he wore my prosthetics well. And I was super proud of him, and
Hmm.
happy with the end results.
Yeah, they looked great. They looked very lived in as well. Like it's not just, just that one scene. It's like you were saying, he was wearing it for a couple hours. So it looks like, both his acting and the prosthetics both came together really beautifully. And you could like, it was brilliant and kind of like not surprising because obviously like this show is just like the caliber of quality in this show is just incredible. But every single time it was a different person. I didn't have to like be like, oh wait, this is Rand as a different person. It just felt like a different person right away,
Yeah.
which was amazing.
I I agree. And also he played the younger ones were probably the ones that kind of touched my heart the most. Him playing a
Hmm.
knight like Lewin when he played
Hmm.
the younger version was
Yeah.
just, it was heartbreaking actually to watch him play those. But as well as the, older versions of himself, but the younger ones, I think
Hmm.
it's really difficult to pull off, and he did an incredible job with those. Like
Yeah.
it was beautiful, yeah.
Absolutely. And then Sharon as well, like the costuming in all of those played a huge, huge part, especially with how you like showed like the ideal going through the ages, because like they do evolve into, throughout time. And it was like brilliant seeing, the nods to both current day Aiel as well as the Tuathalan like current day, and then kind of seeing that progression backwards all the way before, the world breaks, the breaking of the world. So could you talk about the costuming there as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly as you said, you're covering an enormous period of time backwards as
Hmm.
well. And you've got like the really strong colors in the middle of it of the Tuathan before these two groups of people go in different directions. So,
Hmm.
you have to choose your moments where the color is at its strongest,
Yeah.
and then it starts to fade, and each moment, each story has, like a color palette in it based on where that you're at in that
Hmm.
sort of timeline. And also, you've got from the Age of Legends to like almost our current Aiel
Hmm.
world that we're in now, like his parents, or his father rather,
Hmm.
and each. There was also the element of wanting to have something in the costume that made you think about the Cadinsor, which is the kind of uniform of the Aiel,
Hmm.
which is, having something on your head, having something across your body, and having the veil, which is what happens in Lewin. He creates that. They
Hmm.
have this dust veil that becomes very much a very
Yeah.
important part of the Aiel universe. And so I think it was just about making sure that each little story had its own identity. As you say, you felt like you were in that story,
Hmm.
and then you were in the next story, but you didn't, you could see how they were connected, but you could see they had a very strong individual look each as well.
Yes.
And I think in the Age of Legends one, I think that was really where the Cadin saw, you could really see the kind of connection with the Aiel world that I've created for now, or for
Hmm.
Avienda, for example, the Maidens of the Spear and him in
Yes.
that. And you can see it's like the whole of the Wheel of Time in one episode, isn't it?
Hmm.
And it was really good fun to find those details that made sense, and
Hmm.
especially to the fans of the books who will go, oh, look, that refers to this and that refers to that. But if you didn't know all that detail at the book of the books, you could still see a very clear identity each time.
Yes, absolutely. And the Age of Legends, I know we only get to see it like briefly a couple times throughout this entire show, but it's like it's a part of the world that I've always found really fascinating. And it was nice to kind of see a little bit more of that. And we get to see more, people within that. Because the first time that we see it, I believe in season one, it was really just, Lewin and oh, I'm forgetting the name of the Aes Sedai. But it's really just
Yeah.
like the two characters in a room, right, that we get to see. But this time
Yeah.
we get to see a little bit more of it. What's it like working on those sort of, I want to say kind of, those short-lived sort of like moments and scenes, because there's quite a bit of that this season, whether it's, the visions that Moiraine has, or whether it's, Egwene going through the arches, the trials, and there's like all of these sort of like realities that aren't, real. And all these sort of like ephemeral sort of scenes that sometimes they're really quick, sometimes, you kind of stay in them for a little bit. What's it like creating costuming and looks for those? And with a couple examples being, Egwene being like in her trials when she is the Amarylline seat, and then we get to see Moiraine also wearing, a look that is also for as her as the Amarylline seat. What's it like creating those like those looks for these sort of like really short, brief, sort of alternate realities throughout the season?
Well, I will just jump in there because I think it's really interesting when you have a scene that is so brief but you know it's so important in the books that you can't just fudge it. You can't just do a version of a quick version. Egwene as the Amaryllis seat, and Nynaeve and Elaine as her fellow Aes Sedai, powerful Aes Sedai. You have to really dedicate yourself to that moment, and you have to choose, and you have to make sure it is the best it could possibly be for that moment, and that they are very different from each other, that you can still see their own identity, their own personality and character through each look. And likewise, when we did The Forsaken, everybody's
I wanted to talk about that.
young ones is The Forsaken. I think everybody just kind of went, what? Because it is such a quick moment. And again, from mine and Davina's point of view, we really went to town on the individual designs for them and had so much fun and made it very characterful and very detailed.
That's awesome. That must be really special to get to actually like put in so much time and effort into something that is like a brief scene where, it could be justified, to just sort of work on something quick just for this, brief moment. But especially with like Moraine's visions, like those are just like seconds and you get to see like, literally like the scene turns and every single one tells like a story with both the costuming and the makeup and the hair and everything that's in every single one of those, that because it's so brief, like really the visuals have to tell the story to the audience, and it did a fantastic job. In The Forsaken, I'm really glad that we got to see like the photos posted afterwards and actually got to get like a closer look at each of those because they're beautiful. But yeah, like how did you, especially like, Moraine's visions that she's going through, how much work went into that? How much time and how did you craft like the stories within each of those brief scenes with like little to no dialogue in them?
Well, I think for Moraine, we at that point I felt like we had, I don't know, was it something like 19 or 20 or 24, Sharon, of like all of these kind of future, I guess killings of Moraine. And so for me, we kind of started putting together looks that we could potentially do. And we knew that they had to be fast and we knew they had to be quick. So I guess also, Sharon, I think, talking for you, that you had to kind of find what costumes you had available as well. And so we just sort of started from there. Well, I certainly did. And when it came to Moiraine with The Forsaken, that was a happy mistake. We started, with her hair and, with all of her wigs, and we started playing around, and we knew that she had to look like she was beaten and that all of them were coming in to kill her. And so she was like, Davina, what if I just look like I just cut off my hair? And I was like, what? This is a completely different Moiraine that we'd ever seen before. And I was excited for it. And I said to her, I literally have a wig in my case that I'd done for a previous show that we had hacked into it and cut it all up. And so I said, let's just see if it fits. And it fitted like a glove, I tell you.
Perfect.
And it was just, and she put it on and she was like, this is it. And I was like, well, okay, let's see if we'll get this across the line. So that's kind of, it was all of these great happy mistakes, and we just started building and building from there, and just coming up with great hair looks and how she would be throughout, all of her iterations as well.
Yeah, and for Rosamund as well, I was going to say that she is such a great collaborator, as Davina said, and she loves dressing up. She loves clothes. So it was never a problem getting her in for fittings. She absolutely loved going through that process. And it was also, I think, with her, it's her character, with Moiraine, she, in those very short moments, she needs, the majority of the time, she has to be in some blue, because so that is her color and that is the theme that goes through all of her costumes. As in this season, her colors didn't start in blue, but gradually become more and more blue, and that's important. So it was just sort of finding different ways of expressing different shapes and so some kind of drama with her. I'm just thinking about the different costumes. The one where he bows, where she bows to him, she bows to Rand. That's just completely out of context, that costume. But it just, Two Rivers, I just wanted something that was really flowy and really beautiful, and it was a bit water-like, sort of spreading out like that. And other ones, sort of, I wanted to get the famous shoulder piece that Rob Goodwin made in season 1 back in again at some point, because everybody loves that so much. And then it's just sort of building something around that. You want to highlight that, so the dress has to actually be quite simple, elegant, and sort of still feel white towery, but so each time you just have to, it was just play. Actually, it was also just going into this huge workroom that we have downstairs with hundreds of rolls of fabric, and just getting a roll of fabric and going, this would be beautiful in this shape, this has got these 2 different colors going on in it, let's use this. And sometimes they work that way, that the fabrics dictated the costumes as well.
And we do get to see a shift in Moraine's costuming this season. In the previous seasons, it's been a little bit more structured, a little bit more sort of protective, like the shoulder pieces. You've seen kind of a little bit more of like the jacket she was wearing in the very first season, in the second season, the clothing that she's wearing when she goes back home. And in this season, her outfits have been a lot more flowy, a lot less like it to me anyways, it symbolizes a loss of control. And you see her sort of like scrambling throughout the season, trying to figure out like what her role is, what she needs to do, how to help Rand. She's gotten entangled with Lanfear. Like, can you talk about, the choices for the costuming, outside of just, her traveling through the Aiel Waste and having to kind of shed some of those layers, but like the deliberate choices of the fabrics that's being used, the way that, the dress is made for her and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of that first episode, she's back in Tar Valon, but she's trying to hide. She's trying to be undercover. So it was a very interesting process getting to have her in that color that she was in, and have things that are really not blue. And there was a lot of conversations about how is this going to go down, because Moiraine is blue and it should be blue and so on. But we talked about it a lot, and Rosamund, as I said, is very, very much into discussing the character and working things out, making sure it's right for the character. And she said, if you were in a place where your ex was, you're going to be undercover, but you also, if that you happen to come across them in the street, you want to look absolutely fabulous. She was like, well, I'm going to wear this color and I'm going to have this crazy shawl. And then as she leaves, so she does have a bluish costume, but doesn't wear it for very long, just because of the way the edit happened. And then, she gradually sort of sheds those colors, and she does become more fragile, and she does, until she gets to Ruidian, and then she's really facing so many truths, and absolutely at her most sort of fragile and weakest and lowest point, where all the color has sort of drained from her, and she is just sort of a one with the environment. And then she comes out of that, she's still really shaken, and then she starts to regain color as she moves. And those fabrics that we started to incorporate, that had blue pattern but also a lot of brown patterns, it was like the fabric expressed this changing and this slow creeping back of her identity and her sense of herself, from that paler blue sort of chiffony fabric that has all those browns and like light browns and creams and things swirling through it. It's as if the fabric is expressing her inner turmoil and what's happening to her. And the next incarnation of that fabric is a different fabric with the same sort of technique, but the blue is stronger. So it really, when I found those fabrics, because that was an accident finding those fabrics, but those fabrics then really informed what was happening to her. And often that is the way it works, that some things just come into your peripheral vision or come into your consciousness, and without you realizing it, they start to tell a story.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. And like, yeah, like she is gaining more of that color, but also you were saying like the chiffons, like the clothing that she's wearing is becoming more and more fine again, kind of a little bit more true to her that, as we've seen her in the past, as opposed to like you were saying, like the very like the beiges and the outfits that had a lack of color in them that also like the fabric itself wasn't quite so like fine and flowy. It still worked on her, but you could tell it was like she was going through it. And
Yeah,
could you
exactly.
yeah, yeah. And then could you, Davina, also talk about because we get a lot of like close-ups of Maureen's face, especially in episode 4. And as she's, going through the trials and she's in the IO waste and like the sand is really getting to her, right? Like she's in an environment that she is unfamiliar with, that is pretty harsh. Could you talk about like the makeup that was done and also like hair? Because like Maureen this season, I don't think I've seen her hair up once in reality anyways. Could you talk about, the choices that you made for hair and makeup for her throughout the season?
Yeah, definitely. It started, Rosman and I had a catch up before the start of season 3. And in season 2, she had a younger look in season
Mhm.
2, this long haired wig. And I came into her with season 3 going, I want to start off season 3 in this long haired wig. And she was like, wow, okay, this sounds fantastic. And I said, you looked amazing. Like if I was to do, Moraine right from the start, I said I'd have you in, something, flowing and beautiful like this week. And I said, so
Mhm.
I want to make you another one of these that we can just start off the season with a bang. And so she was completely into it. And so that's how that started. And then she said, I've spent a lot of season 1 and season 2 with her hair up. And she said,
Mhm.
so this season I want to spend a lot of it with my hair down. And it was tricky during the fight sequences that you'll see kind of coming up soon.
Mhm.
But yeah, but in saying that it worked really well, and she was just like, no, I want my hair down. So that's kind of how that happened this season, and it works. It really does work. It looks fantastic on her.
Mhm.
When it came to, both her and Ran entering Ruidian, it had a little short bit in the scripts that basically said that they were salty and dry and how we were going to do that, and I'd
Mhm.
spoke to Rafe about that and Thomas and we'd spent a good, 3 to 4 to 5 days doing tests in my workshop of different products, how they were going to stay on, how they were going to look salty and not diminish, how they were
Mhm.
going to stay salty so that we could keep building that look, how I was going to make their skin look dry,
Mhm.
how we could add having them be in the Ruidian as well as look like they had been in there for quite some time. So then therefore we had to bronze them and tan them like they'd
Mhm.
weathered. So, and how that was going to look with all of these products on top. So
Mhm.
we had to start it here in Prague where it was winter, and then we had to go into the, soaring heat of Namibian desert and or the Northern Cape and Cape Town. And
Mhm.
so it was tough to be able to find that balance. And you've got Moiraine, who's got this beautiful skin and it is exquisite. And of course, with all the products that we were using, you wanted to, make sure that none of this irritated over a 14-hour day. So
Mhm.
so yeah, so we did a lot of testing and came up with a version that could stay on her skin while she was upside down in the rings, could stay on Rand while he had huge amount of, these wind machines blowing at him, and none of the salt and none of the product would end up in his eye. So, yeah, so the end result, it stayed, thank God.
Yep.
And I was super happy. Yeah, we could literally do anything to them at that point, and none of it was budging. So, and we could just keep building, which was the main part of it, is that I could just keep adding to it, and it wasn't going to disrupt the whole. I wasn't going to have to start again, So,
Mhm.
so it looked great.
Yeah, no, it definitely looked incredible. And I'm assuming that this was also shot over multiple days. And so did you have to like kind of start over each day and then keep building, or how did that go?
Yeah, definitely. Like it doesn't always work out perfectly. Some
Mhm.
days would start right at the beginning, and some days would go actually today due to whatever, due to schedule, due to casting due to something, we'd have to skip all of, all the other parts of building up and go straight to the end. So yeah, so it was literally a day by day, and that's what I mean by I needed to be able to take it off, put it back on, and be able to change and swap wherever I could based on schedule. That never really works, let's be honest. It's our favorite ever. I think, even Sharon and I were talking like a couple of weeks ago. We literally shot, the 8 episodes that we were shooting all at one time. Like we shot the first 2 episodes, and then after that, it was jumping all over the place. So we had to be incredibly organized and ready for us to shoot, a scene in episode 8 to a scene in episode 5. So
wow, yeah.
It was a lot on my brain, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, I have one more question about Moiraine, and it's about the hat she was wearing. I I have to bring it up. There's a lot of chatter online about the hat, which makes sense. Like she's out in the desert in a place that, with a lot of sun, it makes sense for her to have some shade. But were you expecting audiences to have that reaction? And I saw that you did respond and explain a little bit about it as well. But were you expecting a reaction like that? The internet's an unpredictable place.
No, I know it's funny, isn't it? Because we did talk about her having just a hood of some kind, like the rest of the characters, and it is pretty much in the world of the Wheel of Time, and it's in I guess it's an element of the kind of given fantasy sort of style headgear, and probably me just being quite stubborn. And also Rosamund always being happy to experiment or change things. I thought, well, I don't want to put everybody in a hood, like especially her. She could, of all of the people, this character would possibly have her own thing. And Rosamund definitely wanted something that really shielded her face because, as Davina said, she does have very, very pale skin. And Rosamund, and we did say she could easily have bartered with somebody on that epic journey from Tarval across all that journeying to, she could have given them a piece of fabric or something of her own or some jewels in exchange for a hat. And there's no reason why people have been making hats since medieval times, which is the sort of, pre-industrial revolution times, which is our manufacturing period. So it's not without precedent. And also the fabric that we used was like a kind of Hessian, it's not super sophisticated fabric. I think it's funny, the reactions, because most of them are positive, the ones I hear, but
yeah.
know that it's quite a statement, and often directors don't like actors in hats because you can't see their eyes properly and so on, but I love it. I mean, I love putting actors in hats because I think they're really characterful, and it certainly did what it needed to do for Rosamund. It certainly kept her face protected, so I think it was a success.
Yes.
In the
end. I was grateful, Sharon. I was very grateful.
Nice. Win-win all around. I love it. Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit more about, or start talking about some of the newer characters that we get to see, like the Queen of Andor, Queen Morghese and her entourage, Elida Sedai. What was it like bringing those new characters in and giving them distinct looks in a world where we've already seen multiple different places and multiple different peoples and different looks and different costuming and styles? What was it like bringing them in? And then later on, when we get to see Liandrin's hometown, and we get to see like the boats and like all of these newer pieces that we haven't seen before.
You go, Sharon.
Well, I think that for me, I'm always wanting something new. I never sit still. I always want to go on holiday to a different place. So I mean, it's great. It was so fantastic coming back to season 3 of The Wheel of Time, and it was it's great to revisit places that you've already created, but there's so much fun in designing new things and creating new things and new looks. And I think the key is always for me, from a costume point of view, the research is really important, getting all that information from the books together and making sure you have a really good, solid ground and lots of research and references, and a color palette, and then you can start playing
Mhm.
within that. And so Andor was, the color palette was red, white, and gold.
Mhm.
And we really went to town on that being super stylized, because it makes sense that that's what is pageantry, it's royalty. That's what they do. They use a small palette and they make it into a big statement.
Mhm.
And then, Tanchico was just so much fun to do,
Mhm.
so much so gritty and dark and strange and weird. And, I think between what we did, what Davina did, and what the art department did, we created this completely new environment.
Mhm.
And again, I think it's just choosing a series of ideas or colors or
Mhm.
textures or textiles, and then you can just go to town on that, and you start to create quite a stylized world within that world, but also with lots and lots of individuality.
Mhm.
So for me, it was just, I love doing new things, and I love expanding within the cultures that we already have.
Mhm.
And I think also for me, doing Tenchico and doing Liandrin and the girls,
Mhm.
Rafe just said to me, literally, this is the one moment to go to town and to do whatever it is. And he wanted to have this iconic moment of the girls walking down the street and them looking exactly what, Sharon said, gritty, weird, strange,
Mhm.
and in there and having their Sex in the City moment of walking down the street. And so literally we could do anything. And so at that point it was okay, Leandrin has always had this tied back, where she came from, Tanchico, it was all about braiding.
Mhm.
So when you dive in and you have a little bit more look into the world, you'll see a lot of braiding that happens in that world. And so her braiding started episode 1 into episode 2 and the start of episode 3. You'll see in all of her hairstyles there's a braid of some sort, or small braiding. And so he still wanted to keep that version of it. And so it was actually Kate Fleetwood. I had many, many fittings with her. And then Kate came up and said, I found this picture, and what would it be like if she just had all of her hair out and it was super long? And I was like, you are crazy, but let's give it a go. And so we started doing testing with that, still keeping some braids in there. And then with Sharon's costuming, it worked really well. And I was super happy with the end result. And then you had Ispan, who, was playing her version of her best self. And every single one of them had sort of like this avant-garde, couture moment. And
Mhm.
it was super fun to design those. And then with Andor, I knew that we wanted to sort of have the same hair color that for mum and for daughter,
Mhm.
and so that was the one thing that I had to hit. And then knowing that she was gonna daughter being Elaine,
Mhm.
um, and knowing that she was also the queen, so the hairstyle didn't really come, I had a few options that I wanted to do for her. But then once I saw the crown, because there was a few, how, when Sharon was designing the crown and how that was going to look. And so we
Mhm.
kind of sat back a little bit and waited for how that version was going to be. And then we started playing with face shapes and structure, and she was going to be wearing the crown more than not. So yeah, so
Mhm.
it was a fun couple of episodes, those ones.
Yeah, and that crown is beautiful. It's like when I first saw it, I thought when Elaine was putting it on, I thought she was putting it on backwards, and then I realized, oh no, like that's actually the way it's supposed to be. And it's such a cool design. Um,
Yeah, well, I wanted it to be that.
mhm.
In fact, initially it just finished towards like three-quarters of the way around, like it was like a sort of
Oh,
Roman emperor's um,
wreath.
uh, wreath. Yeah. Um, but Kieran, the director, was worried that from the front you wouldn't even see it. So that's why it ended up being like that. But again, everything with the Wheel of Time, you can do what you want, you can play. So
Mhm.
I didn't want to do a crown that had a pointy bit at the front. I wanted the pointy bit to be at the back, just to make it another take, another way of looking at that kind of royalty. In the same way that, you know, the lions on the Andor, we made them into the lion emblem of Andor. We made into lionesses because she's a queen, she's in charge, you know. All those kind of things. It's just sort of playing with these notions of what is normal, and, you know, feminine versus masculine kind of projections of identity.
I love that. So I wanted to like just quickly pause and see how we're doing on time. I could keep going. I've got so much to talk about if you guys are still okay on time. If not, totally up to you, whatever you're comfortable with.
I'm okay to keep going for a bit.
All right, awesome. Zoom is probably going to kick us out in about 4 minutes. I'll give us like a little warning, but we can just hop right back into the same link and continue if we're still going. Because yeah, there's so much. I love this show. Awesome. So I wanted to talk about Elida Sedai a little bit because she stands out as an Aes Sedai. And like from the way that her hair is done in episode, I believe it's episode, let me quickly double check. I think it's episode 3. When we see her in the costume that has multiple colors. Like I think that's the first time that I have seen, like, or at least where it's been apparent to me that there's like an Aes Sedai wearing not just her colors, but wearing something that's like multicolored. What was it like creating both like the look for her hairstyle wise, makeup wise, as well as like the actual like gowns that she's wearing? And I think, I mean, I can interpret and talk about what I saw in that, but I would love to hear like what, you know, the purpose behind, you know, the fabrics that were chosen, the type, like the way that her hair is put up, because I think it says a lot about her.
Is it the dress?
Oh.
Oh, I think
Sharon
Awesome.
froze.
Yeah, I think Sharon froze for a second there.
Yeah.
That's okay. We can wait for her to come back.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not my internet.
I think it's definitely
It's probably Sharon. That's okay. Technical issues, it happens.
coming back.
Yeah.
I'd run out. Sorry to be.
Oh, no worries. There we go.
Froze for a second.
No worries. You were asking, I think you were starting to ask which outfit it is.
Yeah, is it the one that's like a velvet that's kind of red, different reds?
No,
Dark
that one's
red.
it's the one before that one where she goes to request an audience with the Emerald seat and she's wearing like the red gown that has like the blues and the oranges. And then when she goes to talk to like the Red Aja, like the sitters of the Red Aja, and she's presenting them with gifts.
Yes, I think I know the one you mean.
Yes.
So, well, I mean, for me, the idea behind Elaida is that she is kind of quite old school. She looks and dresses in a way that is sort of a bit out of date compared to especially in that scene within the red salon, where they're all kind of super elegant, really modern, and very simple the way they're dressed. And that's the whole point of the scene, isn't it? That she's trying to present them with this elaborate jewelry, and they're like, no thanks, we do simple. Yeah. Yeah, really for me, from that point of view, is that all of her costumes are just a bit overkill and that sort of like unwieldy, and show that she's out of touch with reality, and she is coming from a completely different place from what the White Tower is these days. That particular costume is made of velvet, and it's heavy, you know, it looks physically heavy. And she's sort of laborious, and, you know, everything is a bit labored in the way that she presents herself. And I guess that was part of the reason for that costuming. In the same way, you know, I was talking about how fabric sometimes speaks to you, and it speaks to me, it speaks to one. And just creates a story that you're not even aware of until you've started or you've gone down a certain point and making a costume, and then you suddenly go, oh my God, that's really relevant to this moment, or that is really meaningful. But it's not always something that you actually like clearly plan. And I think that's what's so exciting as well, especially on a job that is moving this fast. You don't always have time, all the knowledge that the fans have, the book fans have, of all of that information. And so what I was going to say is, you said, oh, I have these theories about what that was about. And I love that, because we are inadvertently hitting points that are really meaningful to the readers of the books. And we're all connected. We're all connecting, through Robert Jordan's writing and what we're doing. And that really, I find that incredibly exciting, that there is this sort of synergy out there. It's very Wheel of Time, that we are communicating across, different cultures and times and so on with each other, almost sometimes by accident. So I'd love to know what you thought of that costume and hair and makeup, and why, what it meant to you.
Yeah, so I haven't read the books, first of all, and I've purposefully I knew the books existed after watching the first season, and then I decided, you know what, let's just watch, keep up with the show, and then just go along for the ride. So I've purposely not read the books, because I do enjoy actually experiencing the visual side of a show, and I know that they are kind of deviating a little bit from it, and I don't mind that. But for me, when I first saw Elida, I think it was really interesting that she came in with the Queen of Andor, and even when we get to see that flashback and she's the one propping her up, there's a lot of pride and a lot of elegance to her. And then later on, when I found out that she was in the running for the Emerald seat when Swan got it, that it just made sense to me, because her costume is very much, she is dressing the part almost of royalty, of the Emerald seat, and she is commanding that sort of respect and presence every time she's in a room. And so it was really interesting to see her falter with the when she goes in and talks to the Red Sitters, because you said, she's out of touch, and and that's the thing, she's been away from the White Tower for so long, and you can see it in her costuming, but you also see how she holds herself. And I love the moment that we get where she's in her private chambers, and even I don't know if it was a robe or a nightgown or something that she's wearing. Even that is extravagant and beautiful. And I think it says a lot about how she sees herself and how she sees her position and her power, as an Aes Sedai within, the community of Aes Sedai, but also within Andor. And she does hold a lot of power there. She is from my understanding, she's pretty much Morghase's right hand. And so she is commanding that power there in the most powerful kingdom, right alongside the White Tower. And so she's just she places a lot of value in that, and she shows that in the way that, not just the way that she dresses, but the way that she holds herself, the way that she wears her hair, and the fact that she doesn't let other people see her when she's faltering or when she's a little weak. And she, even when the Red Sitters kind of rejected her gifts, she still was giving them advice, and was still well, it's going to be your fault. And not just advice, but sort of sticking it to them a little bit. Because it's I was in your place before, and we were, our status was really high. And so she her clothing, and the way that she looks, and the way that she's so particular and polished, and the way that she presents herself is just how she sees herself and how she sees her within the power hierarchy everywhere she goes. So I think it's brilliant. And I think I was also thinking about the colors that were also in the costuming, the other colors that were incorporated alongside the red, in that, yes, she is a Red Aja, but she doesn't limit her view to just the Red Aja's responsibilities. She sees herself as being responsible for more than that. And I think that's part of her, being in Andor and working so long in that place. Anyways, that was my interpretation.
I mean, yeah, she is very ambitious, and she sees herself already as the Amarillan seat. That's her absolute mission. And I think both Davina and I as well, certainly with Swan Sanche, she comes from a much poorer background, and is, in a way, is she's not interested in all the flamboyance and the fuss and so on. And so for her costumes when she's not in her royal finery are very toned down and simple.
Yeah. And is there anything, Davina, that you wanted to talk about with regards to Elida, or like especially like makeup and hair, and how you like wanted to present her?
Well, I knew when Shirai came in, she is a huge fan of Wheel of Time. She basically dreamt of coming in to be a character on the Wheel of Time, and so my first discussions with Rafe was that she's going to go head to head with Swan Sanche. So for that, she needed to look as powerful as we could. And if you look into the White Tower is filled of high fashion, avant-garde, couture hairstyles that and throughout the whole kind of 2 seasons. I mean, you've got Liane who goes into all of these, extravagant hairstyles, and so we needed to come up with another strong hairstyle that would be fitting for her. And so I had pulled some reference pictures of, like a wave that would end up coming into her hair, but also the strength of it would be at the back, like should be refined and elegant in the front, but the strength of it is coming out the back. And so that was when, we started to build like a cone effect, and having a bit of a wave in there as well, which was sort of, I guess with my field, my breaking point is not to go sci-fi. So I can go and dive into the 30s, into the 40s, and into present day. But my breaking point is if it starts to look too sci-fi, then I know I've gone too far. So up until that point, I can start playing with different looks. So the waves that you have in the 40s and the 20s, and starting to kind of put the high fashion of the cone look, into a hairstyle as well. So that's kind of where that came from. And then Sheree was great with just like, I want everything to read in my costume and my hair, and I want my my makeup to be simple, which is exactly where I would like, wanted to take it as well, because otherwise it starts to look a little bit too gaudy. So
yeah.
It was a fine balance. It was great.
That's awesome. And I know that like I don't want to take up too much time. There's a couple more things I wanted to talk about. And I think the evolution of oh my gosh, why am I forgetting her name now? Avienda. So the evolution of Avienda, where we see her go from Spear Maiden to now one of the to a wisdom, and we see like a huge shift, not just in what she's wearing, but like her hair, her makeup. It's a huge shift in, even though she was so resistant in the beginning to going through the trials of Viridian, when she comes out of it, there's like this peace to her. So how did you come up with how you wanted her evolution to be? And the other thing too that I just generally wanted to talk about was the costumes in this show are very unique but very cohesive within, whether it's the Aes Sedai or whether it's the Aiel. So how is it that you come up with all of these different sort of iterations where it doesn't feel like it's a uniform, but it's still very, very cohesive in the looks? Because when she does come out of Viridian from the trials, Avienda, she does start looking like she starts wearing the same clothing as the other women as well. But again, she still looks very unique to her. And even like the Shield Maidens that we see, like they each have their own sort of unique elements to their style, to their costumes, but there is still like this cohesion. So how do you go about doing that without just creating like a uniform that everybody's sort of wearing?
Okay, so I think
Sorry, lots of questions in there.
No, that's good. That's great. The questions are really good. I think when within the IEL, so it's the same for any culture, like I said, you have to have a series of like a color palette, and you have to have a series of textures and fabrics and the type of look and the silhouettes and so on that you're going for. And then, when you have a culture like the Aiel that is very clearly defined between the warriors and the maidens of the spear, and the male warriors and the wise ones and the roof mistresses and so on, so the higher levels of society and the chiefs. Each one of those has to have a look of some kind, and the maidens of the spear and the warriors do have this Cadin-Saw uniform, which is comprised of something on your head, the veil, and something on your chest, which I kind of used more slightly armor-like. That was less Robert Jordan, but that was me making sense of them being warriors. And I think that, the color palette is really neutral, which I was not that excited about when Rafe first told me about it, because I love using color and I felt I was being really restricted. But I think then you have to go into texture, and textures start to have a life of their own. So the wise ones, I bought these vintage pieces of French textile from these markets where I live in France, which have hand embroidery on them. It's all in the same color palette, but each one is different and has its own identity. And it's the same with all of the different characters, that you just give them an element, you give them a piece, or you give them a small bit of a fragment of textile or a necklace or one element to their costume that is quite strong, and then that gives them that really clear, distinctive look. And Avienda goes from Maiden of the Spear in season 2 to she goes back to the Tardag clan, so she goes more into that sort of world, which is like you can see her getting softer, you can see her changing and becoming more one with her people and less of that sort of singular identity or group of three. And then when she goes into the after Ruidian, and she goes into her wise one in training outfit, her and Egwene both have the same outfits, but they do feel different. But they have the top layer is this sort of Aiel drapey shape, and the skirts have the same shapes as the wise ones. So there are certain elements which do link together. But I think just seeing Avienda without all that armor on, without the spears, the whole silhouette is softer. The whole thing starts to make you feel like she has softened and she has got calmer. She has started to become more of a wise one, I guess, which is the whole point.
And Davina, in terms of like the change in both her makeup and her hair, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, it was, when she starts off, we see her in the dark black makeup on the eyes, and the veil goes up when they're in fighting mode. And it was more of, that's what they look like when they're in battle mode. And the black around the eyes was because they live in the desert, and so fighting, and it's to kind of reflect the sand and the sun and all of that sort of stuff. So that's where that part came from. And then when she was going into her wise one, it was a stripping down and a pulling back, and she knew that once she broke her spear, that at that point was a complete change for her. And I think the breaking of the spear, I think, was in her own mind also, that this was the definite change and this is what had to happen. And so from that point, it was literally stripping back everything that we were doing to her in her past, and making her into a more softer version. And so the hair slightly changed, and it went into a softer version of her, which was great.
Awesome. Again, I can keep going, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to end with one really quick question. What look was your favorite this season, whether it's because of the process or how it came out at the end?
I'm definitely in favor of episode 4 with Rand. It was the hardest and the most rewarding for me to pull off. So Rand was great for me. The most fun is definitely Tanchico. Again, Tanchico was brilliant, and really, I just want everyone to kind of go in there and start looking at, what's behind those veils as well, because it's all creepy and gritty in there. So, yeah, definitely a combination of like Rand and Moiraine for me was brilliant this season.
Awesome. And Sharon?
I mean, I think it's very hard when there's so many costumes and, so much fun to be had with so many of the characters. But I think for me, I think that the most fun was the characters and the costumes that we had to create that were on screen for such a short time, like the young ones as Forsaken and the three girls on horseback, because I just love that idea of playing with the idea of really, really going to town on something that was a flash. Because these days, everything, you kind of want to see that everything in 360 all the time. But when you just have that tempting moment of seeing a flash of something, it's kind of like a shot of adrenaline. And it's really good fun to be able to do that on such a massive show.
Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you both so much for speaking with me today. Again, I can keep going. I love nerding out about these sorts of things with the people who actually create them behind the scenes. You're both so wonderful. Thank you again, Sharon and Davina. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I can't wait to see the last two episodes of this show and more seasons in the future.
Thank you. It's been really great questions, and it's lovely
Well,
to
thank you.
talk to someone who's so excited about the show, as
Thank
excited as
you.
we are.
Yeah, I could keep talking about it for ages. So great.
Awesome.
You're fantastic. The
Oh,
questions were
thank you.
brilliant. So I'm glad you're a fan of the show.
Amazing. Thank you both again so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
You
See you
too.
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.